So there are lots of concerns being expressed that Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice aren't moving quickly enough or aren't moving at all to hold the big fish of the insurrection accountable. So let's look for some clues about how Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice likely are approaching their investigation into this unprecedented series of crimes. Because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So we're being inundated, bombarded by stories and complaints and outrage, all suggesting that Merrick Garland isn't moving quickly enough, isn't working his way up the criminal ladder to hold the politicians and the former politicians accountable for their obvious crimes. And I'm the first to admit that I am frustrated. I want all the criminal actors responsible for the attack on our democracy locked up yesterday. But I'm trying not to let my frustration devolve into a conclusion that nothing is being done. But we see quite a bit of reporting that it seems that nothing is being done. For example, here's a new article in the Washington Post. Headline: The Justice Department alleges January 6 was a seditious conspiracy. Now, will it investigate Trump? And that article begins, the Justice Department's decision to charge Oath Keepers with seditious conspiracy last week makes clear that prosecutors consider the January 6th attack on the Capitol part of an organized assault to prevent the peaceful transfer of presidential power. But so far, the department does not appear to be directly investigating the person whose desperate bid to stay in office motivated the mayhem, former President Donald Trump, either for potentially inciting a riot or for what some observers see as a related pressure campaign to overturn the results of the election. Now, all due respect, the Washington Post doesn't know what the Washington Post doesn't know. And I don't say that as a criticism, and I don't say it to be a smart aleck. It's a fact. And we are all looking for signals, for clues about what Merrick Garland's Department of Justice might be doing, how it might be approaching this unprecedented investigation. And I think I found some clues. I went back and reread a 2016 NPR News article, and it talked about how Merrick Garland handled the Oklahoma City bombing investigation. Now, that article was written right after President Obama announced that he was nominating Justice, pardon the Freudian slip, he was nominating Merrick Garland to be a Supreme Court justice. Of course, that would not come to pass. But the NPR article talked about some of the details regarding how Merrick Garland handled the Oklahoma City bombing case. And they're pretty enlightening. And what I'd like to do, and I'll ask you to hang with me because it'll take me a few minutes to lay this out, is I want to toggle back and forth between the Washington Post article assertions that Merrick Garland isn't doing anything to investigate Trump and company, and what we can glean from how Merrick Garland handled the Oklahoma City bombing investigation. So here is some of that 2016 article about Merrick Garland. Headline: Out of the horror in Oklahoma City, Merrick Garland forged the way forward. And that article begins, 21 years ago, the nation was rocked by the largest domestic terrorism attack it had ever experienced. A bomb at the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City killed 168 people including 19 children in a daycare center on the ground floor. Within days, Merrick Garland would arrive on the scene to supervise the investigation and prosecution. Most Americans would not hear his name again until last month, when President Obama nominated Garland to the U.S. Supreme Court. For Garland, the bombing would be a defining moment. And then he's quoted as saying, quote, "We promised that we would find the perpetrator, that we would bring them to justice, and that we would do it in a way that would honor the Constitution," Garland said, his voice cracking. Now, the Washington Post bolsters its assertion that Merrick Garland isn't investigating Trump and company as follows. "The department has not reached out to the Georgia Secretary of State's office about Trump using its leaders to find enough votes to reverse his defeat," a person familiar with the office said, even as a local district attorney investigates the matter. And now, here's a clue from the NPR article about how Merrick Garland operates when there's an investigation that involves many different jurisdictions. Because McVeigh, Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, because McVeigh and his collaborators had moved across many states in executing their plot, grand jury investigations were springing up in a half dozen different states. There were competing local, state, and federal agencies involved, including agencies that had lost men and women in the bombing. Think about that. There were multiple jurisdictions, local, state, federal, involved in the Oklahoma City bombing investigation. Doesn't that sound like the January 6th investigation? With local jurisdictions involved, we've got the feds involved, Georgia State, we know New York is investigating Donald Trump for criminal matters. The article continues, "Under these circumstances, with so many jurisdictions involved," quote, "there's a lot of potential for territorialism, for people to say, you're stepping on my toes, this is my area, this is my city, this is my FBI office," recalled Patrick Ryan, who was then U.S. Attorney in Oklahoma City. Quote, "Merrick was able to navigate that, and I don't think many people could have done that." So friends, could it be that Merrick Garland and his top officials at the Department of Justice are quietly, behind closed doors, communicating with, even coordinating with, for example, the Fulton County, Georgia DA's office, which we know is criminally investigating Donald Trump for trying to steal the Georgia election? Okay, so here's another way the Washington Post bolsters its assertion that Merrick Garland is not investigating Trump and company. The Post article notes that the FBI has not gone directly after interviews or materials from some of Trump's most loyal lieutenants about their strategy sessions at the Willard Hotel on how to overturn the results of the 2020 election. You know, the guys like Bannon and Giuliani and the other lieutenants who were at the Willard Hotel plotting and planning the end of our democracy. Well, this caught my attention from the NPR article, and it provides another clue about how Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice likely are operating. So this from a defense attorney in the Oklahoma City bombing case. Quote, "Even Stephen Jones, the head defense lawyer, said Garland did it by the book. As Jones looked for issues on appeal, he was able to review all of the government's applications for wiretaps that were submitted in secret during the investigation." And then that defense attorney is quoted as saying, "I read all those applications and they were pretty tightly drawn," Jones said. "In hindsight, that was the correct thing to do." So think about this, friends. Does the Washington Post know how many covert wiretaps are in place? How many have been authorized by judges, perhaps against the folks who were gathered at the Willard Hotel? No, the Washington Post doesn't know what the Washington Post doesn't know. Just a matter of fact. And I'll tell you, before I would ever go directly at the Bannons, the Giulianis, and Donald Trump's other top lieutenants who tried to kill our democracy, I would absolutely try to take advantage of as many covert, court-approved wiretaps as I could get, because I would want that kind of covert, deeply incriminating evidence before I ever ultimately stepped directly to the Bannons, the Giulianis, and the others. So might that be what Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice doing at this very moment? And people are misperceiving it as, well, they're not doing anything about Donald Trump's top lieutenants. And then in that NPR article, there is this praise for Merrick Garland, not from a friend or an associate or a colleague, but from the Republican governor of Oklahoma. Frank Keating, the governor of Oklahoma at the time, and the Republican, also points to the contrast between the handling of the Oklahoma City bombing case and the O.J. Simpson and Waco cases, which, if you'll recall, were something of debacles. He, Governor Keating, notes that McVeigh was tried, convicted, and executed in a remarkably short time, and Keating gives the credit to Garland. Quote, "It would not have happened but for his leadership," Keating told NPR. And to look at something as Garland and his team did with an icicle focus, I think that was a superb act. And remember, this was coming from a Republican governor, while Merrick Garland was part of a Democratic administration. And then finally, this, from Merrick Garland himself about the lessons learned from the Oklahoma City bombing investigation. Quote, "We made it up as we were going along, and it was clear when that was over that we couldn't do that again," he said. "We have to have a system." When Garland got back to Washington, D.C., the Justice Department began in earnest to develop that system. It's a system that has been continually perfected and used since then for everything from mass shootings to 9/11. So, friends, when it comes to where precisely the January 6th investigation is at this moment, we don't know what we don't know. But what I do know as a former career prosecutor, and what I think we can glean from that article about the Oklahoma City bombing investigation, is that there are undoubtedly things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about and that we shouldn't know about. Of course, we'll never stop asking questions. We'll never stop voicing our concerns. And I don't think anybody could stop us from expressing our frustration. And of course, we'll never stop demanding accountability and justice. But I do think justice is coming. And we know justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.